Hello, y'all, and welcome to Benevolence, where kindness matters and all are welcome to the table. I'm your host, Ceci Diaz. First and foremost, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and supporting Benevolence. I pray that as you tune in every week, you are empowered, blessed, and encouraged to be the best version of yourself. You are listening to episode 7, Glow Getter. Now, before I introduce our special guest, I wanted to share the definition of glow getter. Glow getter is a driven, busy gal who strives to achieve her goals in life while attaining a beautiful glow both inside and out. Today's special guest exemplifies just that. Not only is she a Jesus-loving glow getter, but she is a soon-to-be doctor. Just last month, she received her white coat, which is symbolic in the medical field, and in less than 4 years, she will be a certified physician. Best part of all of this is that she's Latina. So she's representing all of the Latinas out there who want to be future doctors, pediatricians, dentists, dermatologists, etc. On this episode of Benevolence, I have Nicole Guevara joining me at the table to discuss her journey as a med student. So sit back and enjoy this special episode. Hey girl!
Hey!
Nicole, thank you so much for joining me on an episode of Benevolence in such short notice.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Earlier this year, we talked about having you on an episode for the new season. And we have a mutual family member / friends. So my cousin Amber is one of your best friends. And
yes.
I think we've seen each other before, but I think we officially had a conversation in May. And we talked about having you in an episode, and I'm finally excited, and I'm so glad that the time has finally come. So before we begin, go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so first of all, like I said, I'm really glad to be here, glad to have some time where we can sit down and have this chat right now. I am 24 years old. My birthday was 2 weekends ago, so that is that. And I'm a first-year medical student at New York Medical College. So that's the new season of life that I'm in right now.
That's awesome. So good. Now, I wanted to tell you really quickly that I named this episode, it's called Glow Getter. And the reason why I did it is because glow getter, if you look in the Urban Dictionary, because it's not in the official dictionary, but in the glow getter means it's a driven, busy gal who strives to achieve her goals in life while attaining a beautiful glow both inside and out. And I've been following you for quite a while, and I know that med school is not easy, leaving your family is not easy. You're extremely busy, with this new journey. And I decided, I was like, this is perfect for Nicole because she is a glow getter, because you are glowing, the light of Jesus inside of you while being completely busy, driven, to pursue your dreams. So I just wanted to let you know that's what I named the episode.
Thank you. That is so sweet. I have never heard of the term, but it is the cutest thing. I love that.
Awesome.
Write that down and put it on my desk.
Yes, girl. I'll send you something that says that. So let's go ahead and just begin with a brief summary of your story, where God has brought you to this point. Some of the things that, I don't know if med school was something that you've always wanted to do, etc., but if you would like to share what God has done for you all the way up to this point, and then we'll get into some questions in regard to your career. So whenever you would like to start.
Okay, yeah. So it really has felt like a journey to be here. I actually, when I was in elementary school, I remember, I think I was in 5th grade, and they started building the UCF Medical School. And ever since then, I remember, so I was pretty young when I thought, wow, it would be nice, to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. But I feel like, as any kid, you go through phases where you think, that's what I want to be, but you don't really know at that moment what it's going to take to actually have that come to life. So I was pretty young when I kind of set my eyes and my heart on medicine. Mm-hmm. But then and then going through high school and everything, I still had the same thoughts, went to college, and, I majored in biomedical sciences, and I did a minor in psychology. So that was still very much, the idea. But I think that's really when I found out, partially at least, because now is when I'm really finding out, but what it would take to be a doctor. Because it's nice to say it, like, I want to be a doctor, and that's, it's going to be such a great way to serve others, but it, would take a lot, even just to apply. So I don't know if you know kind of a little bit of the process, but even to apply to medical school, you have to do, well, you don't have to, but to build your profile for these schools, you do research, and obviously you have to make sure your grades are looking good too. So there's kind of a whole lot going on, a lot of like things to check off to make sure that, you prove to these medical schools that you have what it takes, and that you're in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So in college was really when I started finding out, like, wow, this is going to be quite a lot to get there. And so I guess what I would say is, unfortunately, like, a lot of my story had like kind of low self-esteem. Like, I've always kind of like doubted my abilities, despite how like I actually did on paper. So like, building, like I said, this kind of profile, like, even though my grades would look good, or different things, I would make the right moves. Like, thank God, I still struggled with, not feeling like I would have what it truly took to make it there, and so I think that God brought me through the journey and kind of really had me surrender those thoughts and surrender everything to Him. So I guess I would say, like, while I was applying to medical school, that was probably one of the hardest seasons of my life till now, because you've been waiting your whole life, or at least for me, like, I was waiting my whole life for this moment, and finally here it was. And, you start to freak out a little bit, and you're like, wow, okay, like, this is the moment of truth. Am I really going to be a doctor? It's a lot of pressure. So I struggled a bit. I had a plan. I graduated a semester early so I could study for the MCAT, which is the test that you take to apply. And things just didn't look like I thought they would. I thought that I would be very driven to get things done, to study every day, because, this is what I wanted to do. This is what I thought God had placed in my heart to do. But it was really not, that's not how it went. Like, there were days where I really let the fear overwhelm me, and I wouldn't really get anything done. But I think the beautiful thing about it is that every single time that I got to that point where I felt like I don't have the strength, I don't have what it takes, I would just give that to God, and He would strengthen me another day, and I would just push through the studying. And I took the exam, and even though that score didn't look, perfect, it wasn't the score that, you really want to aim for. There was a peace in my heart through the process. And I think that was the cool thing too. Like, it was hard. I cried a lot through the process, a lot of stresses, but there was this peace in my heart where it's like, I know that I'm freaking out right now, but I also know that He's got this. And I know that the end of this is going to be so good. So that was like the best thing about it, where it's like, you can freak out, but you know that God's got you. And there's really no better feeling than that. And so I think, just to kind of make the long story short, where I really saw, like, okay, this is so God, I ended up turning in my applications later than what would be advised, which I'm not afraid to say, because I think that, again, that's what makes this so beautiful. Like, God cares so much about every single detail of our lives. And when we give it to Him and we truly believe that, He has the best in mind for us. And I was truly believing that, He's the one that put this passion in my heart. So if He wants to, He's going to open these doors. And it doesn't matter what the timing looks like, because time doesn't limit Him, And so that's what I kept telling myself. And even though I knew, like, my journey didn't look perfect, I was turning in my applications late because I let myself, be afraid for quite a bit. I knew that I had to just finish it. I had to finish the applications and let God do whatever he was going to do. So that's what I did. I turned them in. I had some pretty late interviews, and even after the interview process. So it felt like there were all these moments where I could feel like assurance, but I wasn't getting that. Like, I took the exam and I thought maybe I'll get the right score and I'll finally feel like this is it. I got this in the bag,
Yeah.
And then I felt like, okay, I'll apply, I'll get an interview, I'll go to it, and I'll feel like I got this. And every step of the way, I wasn't getting that. Like in things that I could have gotten that assurance, I wasn't. So I think that was because he wanted me to rely on him again, and that was the beautiful thing. It's like he didn't want me to, okay, you got the perfect score, so you know that you're going to make it because you got the perfect score, or like you got the interview date early, that means they really want you. Like, I never got that assurance in those ways, but it's because he wanted me to know that he was my like steady ground through the whole process. So at the end of all that, I ended up going to an interview at New York Medical College.
Mm-hmm.
And out of the schools that I interviewed at, it felt like this was the place that I was supposed to be in, like it was hard to explain, but just being here, like I just kind of knew like, okay, out of all the schools, this is where I would see God placing me. But then I didn't hear back from them. And I even sent like a letter. It's called a letter of intent, where you send a letter and you kind of tell them like, you're my first choice. I would really love to go here for such and such reasons. So I did that too.
Mm-hmm.
And in the months leading up to hearing from them, it was hard because I would even feel like I would see New York license plates in front of me as I was
Oh
driving
my gosh.
all the time. Yeah. I can't make these things up. Like I'd be driving and I'd see New York, or I'd go to a restaurant with my mom and I'd see a New York poster, and it was everywhere. And sometimes they say like, because something maybe might be on your mind, you keep seeing it everywhere.
Yeah.
But I'm like, that's not what this is. Like I'm literally seeing it everywhere. So I came to a point where I had to just be honest with God. And I remember I went to the park by my house and I just kind of broke down and I was like, God, like, I know that you want me to be honest with you. And I told him, I'm like, you're hurting me. I'm like, it hurts because if you don't want to take me there, like, why are you showing me this? And like, if you didn't want to take me there, why did you allow me to interview there?
Mm-hmm.
So there were all these like feelings and stuff. But at the same time, I was like, but I'm so grateful that you took me there, because for all these interviews I went to, maybe I went because I had to talk to people there, or you just wanted to show me something in particular. So even though I was hurting, I still kept trying to, but I was honest with him. I'm like, that now this is where I want to go and I don't see anything moving. But I just kept believing. And I also knew that when God opened the door, like he would provide as well. So basically I did get some acceptances to other places, but it still didn't feel like, it wasn't what I was thinking. It wasn't New York Medical College. And it's funny because originally when I started this whole process, I thought I would go to UCF Medical School.
Yeah.
Because, that's the place that I saw originally. But that door never opened. And I remember when I found out that door didn't open, I was just like, God, obviously there must be a reason why you don't want me there. So I'm not going to let that, bring me down. So it was things like that where it's like I just had to continually like encourage myself in the Lord and believe that he was still working, even though I couldn't actually see it happening yet. And in that time, like he gave me some verses to hold on to. And one of them was in Isaiah 55, and it talks about, let me see if I have it here. But basically, it talked about how, your ways are not my ways.
Yes.
And then it talks about how the mountains will burst out in joy and you'll be led forth in peace and all these things. And I thought, that's what it's going to look like. Like, that's your promise for me. And so even as I was finding out these acceptances, I felt like this isn't it yet, like this isn't what you have for me just yet. So I kept praying. I'm like, if you want to, you can open that door. And so when I was in Germany for a missions trip, as I was answering somebody's question of, where would you go if you wanted to, I decided to look down on my phone, and I saw at that very moment that I got the acceptance from New York Medical College.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah. And like, not only that, but the following email was like, we want to give you like some funds to help you out during your time here. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I jumped up like I won Miss America. I was so overwhelmed with joy. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is the moment that you had for me. And it was awesome because here I was like in the missionary's home with like all these people, and they got to pray for me. And it was like, wow, God's timing is so perfect. So
that's wonderful.
That's when I knew, like, okay, God, thank you. This is how you work. Always goes above and beyond, and it's always worth it to just wait on him,
Amen. That's awesome, Nicole. One thing that you mentioned earlier was when you had gone to the park to pray to God, and you kind of told him that, like, you're hurting me. And I've been in those positions before where I'm like, God, really? Like, why are you allowing me to go through this? You know what I mean? Like, why are you playing with me? And I kind of felt like, we need to share that with especially our listeners whose the demographics are all over the place. We have, all the way from 50 all the way to teens listening on Benevolence. But like, we have to encourage them to, like, it's okay to talk to God like that. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes we see him as this, he is this heavenly, being and whatnot, but he does live in our hearts, and he understands our feelings. And sometimes, like, it's okay to be straight up with him. I remember there was a time where this year where my faith was quivered and shaken. And I literally told God, I was like, I'm mad at you. And I was completely honest with him. And I says, I'm upset at you. I'm so mad at you right now because you're allowing this to happen. And I know obviously we're upset, but God understands. God sees it. You know what I mean? He was human himself when he came down to earth. So he understands the emotions that we feel, and I loved how you said, why are you playing with me? Like, you're hurting me, so it's okay to go to God and tell God that you're hurting or that you're upset. God sees our hearts. It's okay to be transparent. And I just wanted to share that part because that's just, it's good to be raw with God. Like, be raw with him. He understands,
Yeah.
But that is such a beautiful story. It's funny, as you're talking about how you signed up late and all that, it kind of reminds me of Amber's situation too. If her situation with going to London with the veterinary school, she was like last minute. She was like procrastinating. She didn't know if this was the right thing, and then she did it, and she wound up getting chosen. And it was very similar to yours, how you were just hesitant to apply. You were hesitant to move forward. You kind of sent these applications a little late, but God did move on your behalf. So just, God has a plan, regardless of the situation. So it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful season that you went through. But the season's not over yet, Nicole.
Oh no.
You just started
a new one.
We just started a new one. So I guess my first question to you would be, why did you want to become a doctor? Because at this point, we have a bunch of nurses. Why didn't you think of nursing? Why did you want to go further to the, doctor?
Yeah, so that just makes me think of my mom, to be honest, because she always, I always say, I want to be a doctor. And she's like, are you sure? Not that she would, ever doubted that I could make it. It's just, she's like, nursing is good too, and it'll be less time, or PA school would be
Yeah.
less time, and I think it comes from a place where like your parents just want you to minimize the I guess, how do you put this, because it's not like it's not suffering, but like minimize the hardships, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
know that was her way of protecting me, but I just always thought like, even though there are, and that's a beautiful thing about medical profession, there's so much diversity, nursing, PA school, and I think they're all amazing. um, I just thought that as a doctor, it would be the best way that I could truly partner with these patients,
Hmm.
because I feel like it's a different kind of relationship when you have like, your patient and a physician, like, and that's not to downplay any relationships that any of these other medical professions have. But I feel like there's a level of responsibility that comes to it where, the physician is really the one that's going to partner with the patient to decide what treatment they're going to get and all these
Exactly.
things. And I thought to myself, wow, like, I want to be a part of that. I want to help in whatever way I can. And it's just such a beautiful thing, that relationship. And I've always felt like God made me a very relational person. I love just being with people, listening to their stories, all of that. So I just felt like it would be a great fit to do that. But also, um, spiritually speaking, too, I was reminded of the story of the man. I don't know if you remember the story of the man that was paralyzed and he was lowered through the roof,
Yes.
um, by his friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that story, it was like, his friends wanted him to experience healing, and they believed, maybe if we lower him through the roof, like, he can be healed. And it was interesting to me because in that, Jesus' response wasn't to first heal him, it was first to deal with his sins, and forgive his sins.
Yeah.
And I remember one time reading that story and just thinking, wow, like, that's kind of what happened. So I'm sure the paralyzed man, his first thought wasn't his sins, like, he was
Yeah.
there to try to receive healing. But what happens is, and I feel like with a lot of people, it's hard for them to even think about God if they're dealing with something physically,
Yeah.
because that's what they're seeing. And so I remember just after I read that story, I'm like, wow, like, yeah. And so as a doctor, I would be able to help bridge that gap. Like, I could help them with what they're seeing physically, and maybe in the way that I'm treating them, point them to Jesus, and open that door for them.
Beautiful. I love that. Is there a difference in years when it comes to doctor and nursing? Is it the same years?
So, at least, for doctors, it'd be the 4 years of medical school. So that's after you finish a bachelor's degree. And then you do a residency program, which the lowest amount of years is like 3. So I think it's like 3 to 5 years in addition.
Okay.
For nursing, I don't really know if it's a 2-year program. And then if they do like nurse practitioner, it's like 4. I'm not sure. And I don't want to say like, for sure, but
But
I don't think
okay.
it's as long.
All right. So it is different. And it's not as long as a physician, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's my understanding of it.
Okay. Awesome. So what challenges did you face in college, which was you graduated from UCF, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So
Class
what
of
challenge
2017.
nice. What challenges did you face in college, and what are some challenges that you're facing right now in medical school?
Yeah, so in college, I kind of mentioned a little bit about like, trying to figure out like how to build this profile. Um, and I also wanted to make sure that I wasn't taking on things just because somebody else was telling me I should. Because I never feel like that's genuine. Like, even when it came to research or different things, I wanted to make sure that if I choose to do something, it's because I truly am going to be invested in it, and I'm not doing it because I have to. Um, so those were, sometimes challenging. There were a lot of moments where I had to make these decisions, like, do I do this research opportunity? Do I do this one? All those things. So that was all pretty hard. But, in retrospect, I really believe, again, like, just praying to God, like, Lord, I got to make this decision, because he's not really going to make it for me. But just believing that no matter which one I choose, he was still going to be with me. That always, like, would help overcome those challenges of making decisions.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would say, some of the classes, so my last semester at UCF, it was my hardest one, because I didn't think I would do the whole graduate a semester early to study. I thought I would apply my junior year.
Mm-hmm.
And so my last semester, like, I didn't think it would be that difficult, but it actually ended up being pretty difficult. I had this class called microbial metabolism.
Oh my God. It already sounds hard.
Yeah. Yes, just think about it. All of these bacteria and things, like, we're just learning about how they metabolize nutrients, and all these pathways that you have to learn with all these different enzymes. And I just thought to myself, I don't like this. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna learn it. And even the professor himself, sometimes you have people in your life that don't make you feel so good about yourself.
Yeah.
And so that was challenging, just because I started out in that class not doing so well. But I knew that I had two choices. Either I sit back and I, just wallow in how stressful and difficult it is, or I decide to get out of that and try my best. And so I would go to the office hours and talk to the professor and ask him questions. And I always felt like, in a way, he kind of doubted that I would make it, as a doctor. Like, they would make these kind of comments in lecture, like, if you don't know this, I don't know how you're going to make it through medical school, And I felt like, wow, okay, maybe he's right. Like, maybe I can't do this, but I just kept pushing through. And in the end, he actually ended up being one of my letters of recommendation for medical school.
Look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say, like, some of the challenges have been, like, you have to learn to block out those negative voices and tune into what God is saying, because God is never the one to be telling you, you can't make it, you don't have what it takes. And I think that that's true even now in medical school. Like, that has been a challenge. Not only that, but I would say also comparison, because everybody here is obviously incredibly smart. And that can be pretty intimidating a lot of the times, Like,
yeah.
So yeah, that was something that's challenging here. Like, I felt like I had this security, like, God brought me here. I know he did. Like, look at this story. And then I got here, and suddenly you feel like, oh my goodness, like, do I have what it takes again?
Yeah. You got this, girl. We believe in you for sure. So what kind of adjustments did you have to make, especially now, like living in New York? So what were some things that were drastic adjustments?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I have roommates now. So that's new.
Yes.
I have 3 roommates. I never dormed on campus. I always commuted. So that's different already. And just like study techniques had to change, still changing. So that was also an adjustment. And also back home, I had, my stable church family for like 19 years of my life, pretty much.
Yeah.
Grew up in church. And so moving here, it's really starting everything new. And I never had that before, because I only, I moved from Puerto Rico when I was 4, went to Orlando, and that was that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was kind of like pretty difficult. A lot of emotional stuff that came with kind of adjusting to life here. There was a point where I thought to myself, I just want a hug from somebody that loves me,
Oh.
Like, yeah. it can be rough, but now I can definitely say that I'm adjusting so much better. Like it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't let yourself be frustrated, at the fact that why haven't I adjusted yet? Like it takes time, because it's new. But I can definitely say I feel a lot better now. And you meet new people, and it's just, yeah, it's good. Like, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And we'll continue praying for that because I know homesickness is like no joke. It's no joke. So just, we love you. We're rooting for you. We're praying for you. And we just know that in it, at the very end, you're going to look back and you'll be like, wow, like this was all worth it, you know? So it's one of those experiences that you're definitely going to have at the end.
Yes. Thank you. Amen to that.
So my next question is, what advice would you have for yourself? What advice would you give yourself if you could go back 5 years?
Yeah. So 5 years ago, I was finishing high school. And so I was going to start, the whole journey in college. I would just tell myself to not worry so much about what others think, or, try not to doubt myself, because God is the one that put these, talents and abilities, and he just wants me to use them for his glory. So I would just
Mm-hmm.
remind myself to not put myself down, to always just be confident, not because, not confident because this is who I am, like, in a cocky way, but like to be confident because God is the one that gave me these abilities, and we can be confident in those things. So that's what I would say, is just like, you know, never doubt that God's got you.
That's good. That's awesome. Now, have you ever considered changing your major, uh, either recently or maybe in UCF? Were there moments where you were like, oh no, I gotta do this? Like, I gotta change this. This is too much.
Yeah, there were moments. I don't know that really in undergrad I felt that way. I
Hmm.
would really say that it was when it came to the moment to apply to medical school.
Yeah.
Um, because I just thought, like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, and then I also just had this pressure of like, I want to make the right choice, like for God. I want to make sure that I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I remember talking to this one person one time, and they told me like, you know, let me pray for you. Let me see what God, or not let me pray for you, but she said something like, she was given this ability to help people out with their difficulties. And
Hmm.
so she told me to kind of talk to her. I told her, like, I'm not sure if I should apply to medical school. She came back and she told me, like, well, I think that maybe, God gave you like a heart of missions, and maybe like that's what he wants you to do.
Wow.
And I just didn't feel peace with that answer, because even though I know that on the one hand, God has given me a heart for missions, I it didn't feel like, there was peace about that statement.
Hmm.
And but that started a whole thing where it's like, oh my gosh, like, am I supposed to just go now and be a missionary? Or am I supposed to go, through medical school, and then in that later on do medical missions?
Hmm.
So yeah, there were moments where I was like, oh my gosh, am I making the right choice?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. But I would say what kept me on this path was knowing that there was this verse actually, and it talked about how, he takes no pleasure, I think it's in Hebrews, in those who shrink back. And so I knew that if I didn't apply to medical school, it would be because of fear.
Mm.
And that just didn't sit right. Like I knew, again, like I'm like, wait, that's not God. Like he's not going to tell me, missions is a beautiful calling, but he's not going to
Hmm.
tell me don't apply, kind of because you're not going to make it, or all these things. Like it just felt like
Yeah.
if I chose not to, it would be because this is uncomfortable, this is hard, and I want to escape, you know?
Yeah. Wow. Who inspires you?
Well, it was funny that we were talking about Amber, because her faith actually inspired me through this process too.
Hmm.
A lot of people, but I would mention her too. Like she's always had this faith where it's like, no matter what I see or no matter how I do on this test or whatever, like if God wants me to be a vet, I'm going to be a vet.
Yeah.
And that was always inspiring to me because I was like, wow, I want, to look at things that way, to just hang by faith and say, it's going to happen, if that's what he has for me. So that was inspiring to me.
That's awesome. She's so good. If you're listening, Amber, we love you.
She's going to say, why did you say Amber and not Ambar?
I know. I don't know. I can't help it. I always call her Amber. Like, for real, since birth. I just can't. Everybody says Ambar, and I'm like, no, it's Amber. We love you.
Yes, we love you.
So, what was the best advice that someone ever gave you?
Okay, so this is going to sound really weird, but I was at a trampoline, one of those trampoline places.
Yeah, the jumping
And
places.
yes, and there was a little ramp, right? And you're supposed to run up to this ramp and pull yourself up and ring this bell.
Yeah.
And I kept seeing all these little kids running and doing it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to try to do that. And this was again during this whole season of like applying and just being really uncertain about things. And I kept trying to run up this little ramp, and I would make it halfway and fall. And then at one point, this stranger comes by and she tells me, just get out of your head and do it. Okay. And at that moment, I was like, okay, like stop hesitating, don't think, just go. And I did it.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, so it's a small thing, but I thought to myself, oh my gosh, sometimes we get so into our heads. And if it would just cut those thoughts out and get things done, it'd be so much better.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was some good advice.
That's awesome. That's so good. Because sometimes like we allow our minds to just take over. And our minds are, they're killers, our thoughts. And like I struggle with that as well. Like you can't do it. And it's an insecurity. And I'm telling you, if we just block those negative thoughts, we can do anything, So that was really good. That's actually like a godsend quote or encouragement.
Yes, I think so too.
So what are the hardest things about med school? I can never say it right. What are the hardest things about medical school so far?
Yeah. Wow. But let's just say they are not wrong when they say this is very difficult. But yeah, it's like, I think one of the biggest things is adjusting to the amount of material that you're receiving. Because it's a lot. Like you'll get now in this block like 15 lectures per week, and that's like without counting all the other things that you kind of have to get done. Like we have a class called Foundations of Clinical Medicine where you practice doing like physical exams. So you're basically in class from 9 to 5, and then you study, and then you start the next day, and it's the same thing,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think one of the hardest things is adjusting to, wow, this is a lot of material. Because in undergrad, it wasn't, we've never had 15 lectures like in a week. So yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest challenges. And then I would say, at least for me, because I'm moving from home, and so it's been a challenge to adjust to all of this without kind of having my support group near me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that has been rough too.
Wow. Now, what are the best things about medical school?
Yeah, so I would say at the end of the day, I love it. I really do. And I think that's one of the best things. It's like, even if I'm so overwhelmed and stressed over material or whatever, I step back and I think, this is incredible. Like, what I'm learning is awesome. Last block, we did anatomy. So we got to work on cadavers and like dissect them, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, not your normal day, but it was amazing. Like I got to hold heart, I got to hold his lungs and that is just wild, like the last thing is we got to like hold the brain, and it's like, this is really happening. Like, this is how our bodies look like. And like, in comparison to the pictures that you see, like the pictures are pretty accurate, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like,
Oh my God.
that's what it, yeah. So it's amazing because of that, to think like the things you get to learn, it's mind blowing. And our bodies are so incredibly complex. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
just, wow. Like, getting to learn about how God made everything work so perfectly, that's
Mm-hmm.
really exciting.
Wow, that's amazing. How do you, and this is not like part of what I sent you, but how can you deal with the blood and all of that? Like, was that something that you've always been able to deal with, or just, I don't know, because people can't deal with
Yeah,
that stuff.
yeah. Well, okay, these bodies have been prepared. They go through this process of being like embalmed and all that, like preserved.
Yeah.
So I guess we're not really dealing with, all this blood gushing out, all these things, mostly like body liquids, so like fatty stuff and things like that.
Okay.
So I guess there wasn't like it's not like I'm seeing like all this blood, like we cut open and there's blood coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I didn't know how I was going to react. I really didn't. And the day that we got to hold the heart was one of the days where I kind of had to hold myself and be like, whoa, this is pretty wild, because you
Oh
have
my
to
God.
open this rib cage. Like, yeah, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but yeah, like we had to
No, you're
actually like
fine.
open up the chest, or like crack the ribs and like all that. And I'm like, this is not normal. Like, this is not your normal. You don't just crack some ribs to open up, a chest. So yeah, pretty crazy, but I don't know. Like, I felt like okay about it. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Wow. I give you props. I don't know. Like, I'm pretty good with like seeing gory things and blood and all that, but I don't know if I can see like a heart and stuff. That's
It's really cool though. I think you'd
different.
like it.
So on a serious note, let's talk a little bit about suicide among med students. And this is something that I think in the past like 5 years, I've I've been reading up on medical students who've been just committing suicide and fall into depression and all that stuff. And what's interesting is that it led me to you, and we're here today recording this. I actually get to personally speak to someone who is in the medical field, and we can talk about this. But in the past years, there's been a large number of medical students who have committed suicide, and a couple of the stories that I've read were from New York, but I don't know if it was like Manhattan, or I don't know if there's another medical school in Manhattan or something. But I remember like there were some cases just like very close to each other of some med students who were just like almost ready to graduate. You know what I mean? And receive their certification, and then they would commit this act. So these students are
Yeah.
learning to take care of others. Many fail to take care of themselves in the process, and it's become a stigma of getting mental health um, care, because they see it as a sign of weakness. Imagine you're a doctor, you're learning to be a doctor, um, and you're not helping yourself. You're not helping your state of mind. And then I put here that medical students are 3 times more likely to commit suicide than the general population of a similar age. So I guess you know I'm so glad I'm talking to you today, because I've always wanted to know, like, why is that a common thing? Like, what is it that's pushing these students to that point? Obviously, there's other issues where people actually have mental health issues, diagnosed. But then, but what is it when they chose such a field where they know it's intense, but what leads them to take those acts in the end?
Yeah, so I definitely have also, heard about that, and it's very sad, obviously, and even
Yeah.
like you mentioned, sometimes it'll be the year before they finish.
Yep.
It's very sad, and I can't speak, on their behalf, because I'm not sure exactly how they felt, but I can say, being here now, that one of the things, and you mentioned it, it's like there's so much going on, and you need to be so intentional about making sure that you're okay, in the midst
Yeah.
of all these classes and all these things going on, to make sure that you're okay emotionally, because it's a lot. And I think maybe like, even though we know going into it, it's going to be difficult,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think until you're here is when you really know what that means. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and so it really takes a lot to get out of that mindset. And I'm saying that even personally, like there have been times I call my mom, my sister, and they worry because they're like, oh my goodness, like you can't be overwhelmed by anxiety and all these things. Like you need to take care of yourself. But it's just because sometimes it like I said, I think it's just intentional, because you can let yourself so easily stay in that, like, I'm so overwhelmed, there's so much to get done, and just the pressure of the responsibilities that you have
Mm-hmm.
can do that to you. And yeah, like it's rough. So I would say that I can understand to an extent, where it could get to the point that it's so overwhelming, just because there's a lot going on. And it's not really maybe like what we were built to do in a way, like to
Mm-hmm.
withstand these stresses. Like exams, at least for now, they keep like going up in how long they are. But right now, our last exam was 4 hours, and you don't get a break. And so after these exams, you literally feel like you're not functioning for at least the rest of the day. Like
Wow.
can't really speak right, can't really, because you're putting in all this brain power to like answer these questions. Um, and so it can be pretty draining. So yeah, like that's what I would say. It's just that it's it's a lot.
Um,
Yeah.
Now, something else that I wanted to ask you was, um, how are you preparing yourself for for future deaths of patient deaths, or I'm sure PTSD happens a lot among like the people in the medical field. When you kind of get attached to a patient and something just happens, naturally, or a malpractice, or obviously malpractice you try to avoid as much as possible, but you get attached, and how are you preparing your mind to come, you're gonna see that in the future, you're gonna have to come across that. How are you personally preparing yourself for that future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I I don't know that right now, honestly, I'm doing anything to actively prepare for that, just because I feel like there might be things obviously that you can do to prepare, but until that moment comes in my life, I won't really know, how to
Yeah,
react.
what it's
But
like,
I
for
can
sure.
Right. But I can say, like we have an ethics class that we take here, and like classes like that, we kind of practice scenes, like they'll give us like, if this scenario happens, how would you react? And so that is done so that we kind of, in a way, learn how to, it's kind of like you write a script, you prepare kind of how would I
Hmm.
react in this situation. And so I think that things like that class, they're helping me, because that that can be a way for you to prepare. Like even though I haven't had that moment yet, I can kind of learn to, if that moment were to come, how would I react? How would I talk to the patient's family members, and all these things. So I think that that's good. It's helping me like to think about it. But I haven't really done anything just yet to prepare. I'm not gonna lie. So I
Yeah.
know that that's gonna be tough
Yeah,
when
and
it happens.
I'm glad that you mentioned the ethics class, because see, I don't know what it is, you guys, what kind of classes y'all take. I don't know if that's something that they prepare you for, especially when you're doing like an internship or something, that where you're actually on the medical field eventually, where you have to be in the hospital or something like that. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but that's good to know that they do prepare you for those situations, um and that's like the downside, of being a physician, you helping others, but then there's obviously, situations where are out of your control as a doctor. which, a patient, passes away or stuff like that. But I know for a fact, Nicole, that you're going to be A-okay because you have someone inside of you who is going to carry you through. So there's no doubt about that whatsoever.
Yeah, amen to that. Honestly, that actually just makes me think of, when I was talking earlier a little bit about, just the fact that sometimes there's like negativity and people will think like you're going into the medical field, it's going to be tough. Like even things like this, like you're mentioning, dealing with deaths and all of that. But yeah, that has been one of the things that I thought. It's like, I'm not going to make it through because of me. It's because like he is what replenishes me, like the love that I'm going to give these patients, the patience that I'll have with them, and all these things, and the compassion, it's not my own. And so I don't have to fear that, because I think also something maybe we haven't really mentioned, but kind of like this burnout, or how do you deal with that, where you meet
Yeah.
physicians that are kind of come to a point where everything is just normal, like you're burnt out, you just do it as a job and that's it. But I've always thought, I don't see that happening, because if God is who I'm going to every morning to be refreshed, I will have that fresh love to give on them, that fresh compassion, that fresh empathy. And so, yeah, like I think that will be the biggest thing to deal with, like, burnout or stresses in life. It's like God will be the one to supply what I need to get through it.
That's awesome. Sounds so good. Moving on, I found some top misconceptions of med school and med students that I would like for you to debunk. And then we'll wrap it up. But so far, I just want to thank you, Nicole, for your insight and for taking the time to do this. Um, I'm so proud of you. I know this is not over yet. I want you back on Benevolence, when you've reached that goal, and we can talk more about that journey, because I know you've just started your journey here, not here but in New York in med school. But I can't wait to hear the great things that God has done in your life. But before we get into the wrap up part of this episode, let's go ahead and debunk some top misconceptions. So the first one is the top misconception. This is actually was the number one. It says, say goodbye to your social life. So what do you have to say about uh, that myth, I guess?
Yeah, so in my case at least, I would definitely say that that's a myth. I think people, prioritize different things, but for me, I think having a social life outside of medical school is one of the healthy ways to deal with everything. So that's always been important to me, even in undergrad, to make sure I had time for the people in my life, because we don't know, being
Mm-hmm.
honest, how many days we have here. And even though medical school is important, I know that family isn't always going to be there. So I always want to make sure I make time for family and friends. So yeah.
That's awesome. So you need a social life to get through. You need it.
Yes, you need friends, you need support.
Yes, absolutely. The second one is you just have to pass the class. So I don't know how that
Yes.
works.
So here they actually did implement what's called, pass or fail. So
Okay.
technically, you really do just have to pass the class, because they're not really looking at, it's an A, a B, a C. What you want to do is get above a 70%, and that'll be passing. So in a way, you do really just have to pass the class. But I think when it comes to this, it's kind of saying like you're not in it just for a grade. Like you're in
Okay.
it and you're doing this for patients in the future. So you don't just pass a class to get the grade you need. You're trying to get this information and learn it.
Okay. So it's a pass or fail type setting.
Yeah, at least
Okay.
here.
At least there. Okay. All right. That's awesome. Thank you. Number three, your board scores are really the only thing that matter. Now, before you get into that, please explain to me, and especially to our listeners who are not familiar with board scores, like what is that?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that's just referring to the exam. So you take 3 exams to get your licensing to be a doctor. The first one will be after my second year, I believe. We take things here step by step. So I haven't looked into all the details yet.
That's great.
But I know that we have 3 exams. And so and they're called USMLE, or like step exams. And so you want to make sure that you do well in those exams, because when you apply for residency programs, they look at those scores. And so I guess, when they talk about that, they're referring to those scores and how you want to make sure that they're good, because like in a way, when you're taking these classes, it's preparing you for those exams.
Okay, I see.
So I would say they are part of what matters, but again, like, it's kind of like an undergrad. It's part of a profile of who you are, but it's not going to be everything that they're looking at. And so obviously, they're going to be seeing how involved you were in the community, different things. And so it's not going to be just about, scores, I don't think.
Okay, that's good to know. The next one is, it's not that the information in medical school is hard. It's just that there is so much of it. So do you agree or disagree with that statement?
I agree and disagree, because I think that for some of the things, it's not the concepts that are difficult. You can definitely get it. And especially nowadays, you can find a great video on YouTube and it'll explain the same concepts. So I think that sometimes it's not that the material is difficult. It's just there's so much, and you don't know what you're going to be asked about. So you have to kind of know everything. But there are certain subjects that it just takes a little bit more effort. So I would say that it's that there's a lot of it, and it's the timing of it, that makes it difficult.
Okay. I'm sure. Now, really quickly, side note, what kind of classes are you taking this block?
Yeah, so this block I'm taking physiology and biochemistry.
Okay. And it's just 2, but there's 15 lectures a week, you said?
About 15 lectures a week. It's those 2, but then we also have Foundations of Clinical Medicine, which is the class that, teaches us how to do physical exams and things like that. And then we also have some ethics sessions in there. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, girl. I'm going to be praying for you.
Thank you. Yeah. If you saw my calendar, you would be like, oh my goodness. So that's why I say I take it one day at a time.
Yes. That's the only way to do it. Number 5. So you have to be really smart or get straight A's to get into medical school. So what do you think?
So definitely, I don't think you have to get straight A's only. There have been people that have made it, without a 4.0. I didn't have a 4.0. I'm not going to lie, though, I did have near a 4.0.
Okay.
But I know that, like I said, it's not just about that score. So if you show that you did other things like research, you did a lot of volunteering, it's really a matter, I think, of showing how passionate you are. And so even if your grades aren't the best, you can compensate for that by, how you prepared for the MCAT, which is a test that you take to apply, how you did all these other experiences as well.
Thank you. And the last one is, you have to be rich to afford medical school.
I think that the people that are rich have a good advantage, but definitely not. You are going to be in debt, though. So if you're not rich, you got debt.
Yeah.
But, there's always a way to make it. And I think of it as an investment. Like some people are buying houses and doing things. Well, my career is my investment,
That's
so
good.
Yeah, you don't have to be rich for sure, because I am not rich. I am very much in debt, but that'll be paid off little by little once the journey begins.
Amen. Yes. And my last and final, well, first, thank you for answering those misconceptions And I wanted to end this conversation with you of on this note. What advice would you give to young women who aspire to be in the medical field, especially Latinas?
Yes, I would say we need you. Like, I was sitting here for our orientation, and I found out when I was looking at the statistics that actually, even in comparison to, obviously there are many minority groups that are underrepresented in medicine, and that includes, African Americans, but our percentage is actually even less than African Americans, which to
Wow.
me was surprising because I always thought, African Americans, that's what you mostly hear, they're underrepresented. But
Mm-hmm.
the numbers for female Hispanics are even less. So I was just really, that kind of shocked me a little bit. I'm like, wow, I knew I was a minority, but I had no idea that much of a minority.
Mm-hmm.
It's so needed. Even when I was shadowing the other day at a hospital, I went in with the doctor, and the family, they're like, as they describe things and they're talking to the doctor, they kind of look to you, because they know, like, oh, you're a familiar face, like you speak Spanish. They want to kind of direct themselves towards you. And so I think, and that's the whole point of having, minorities being represented, because I think in a way you're gonna feel a different level of comfort when you're with someone who understands your language, who you can speak to in your own language. So yeah, it's so needed.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Yes, you're welcome.
Well, there you have it, girl. I just want to thank you so much for joining me on an episode of Benevolence. You are such an inspiration to so many young women, especially us Hispanic girls, who need the extra encouragement to reach our dreams. So you're definitely a glow-getter, not only because of your perseverance, but also because of the light of Jesus that you shine for all of us to see. And I just want to thank you again. I will be praying for you. We support you. Me and my family support you throughout this journey. And I just thank you so much for taking the time to give us some insight on, the med school, journey. Because I have no friends, no family members that, have been in that journey or who are currently or desiring to pursue that journey. So thank you, Nicole, for taking the time to be on Benevolence with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. And, I hope that this serves as some encouragement to, someone listening. And if anyone ever has any questions, they can feel free to, reach out to me too, because it's definitely possible. God puts these dreams in our hearts, and he does it for a reason. He wants us to use the gifts and talents that he gave us, and to be confident in that. And yeah, it's awesome that we got to talk even about mental health and all of that, because we have to take care of ourselves, and wellness is an important thing. Mental health, it's a tough thing. So there's ways to overcome it. And that's the good thing about this. It might be tough, but God gives us the strength. 100%.
Amen. That's awesome, Nicole. Thank you all for tuning into Benevolence, where kindness matters and all are welcome to the table. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Benevolence Podcast or at I am Ceci Diaz to learn a little bit more about me and Benevolence. Benevolence Podcast is available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If there is a topic that you would like for me to discuss in the future, please do not hesitate to email me at benevolencepodcast@gmail.com with your requests, petitions, questions, comments, or testimonials. I want to hear from you. And stay tuned for next Monday's episode of Benevolence. You don't want to miss it. Bye!